Well, Fire Emblem, you've done it again. I've always personally found characters to be the strongest part of the series, and Echoes holds true to that tradition. By God, are the heroes of Valentia fantastic! I thought these guys and gals were some of the most delightful and lovable casts in the entire series, and pretty potent party members. While the number of characters is pretty damn small, I can't deny how much I love them, and I find the majority of Echoes characters to be excellent. In fact, there are 10 in particular that I feel are more than worthy of Miller's blessing. So join me everyone, as it's time to forge our destiny and fight for our homeland, as I count down my top 10 favourite Fire Emblem Echoes characters. As always, this is just my opinion and is a personal favourites list, not an objective one about which characters are statistically the best in terms of gameplay. I'm only going to be looking at playable characters, so sadly no Fernand or Bakut, and if there are characters on here you don't agree with or think should be switched out, that's fine, you have every right to disagree. Also, no amiibo characters will be included. And with all that cleared up, let us embark on a journey to take our lives into our own hands. And with these 10 teammates by our side, not even the gods can stand in our way. Lucas. I've always prioritized character over combat when it comes to picking favourite Fire Emblem units, and Lucas is another case of this. Since out of the 3 knights, he's actually the weakest statistically, and objectively he's not that great of a unit, but he's by no means bad, and was definitely useful from my experience. Plus I really like Lucas for his character, and he played quite a hefty role in Arm's part of Echoes, so he's got that going for him. Since Arm starts out as a villager, Lucas acts as the catalyst for Arm to join the Deliverance and start him on his journey. Being a knight of the Deliverance, Lucas is very articulate and well mannered, and I found him to be very charming and gentlemanlike, so right off the bat I immediately admired him. Lucas plays a significant part in the first part of Echo's story and pops up here and there during the rest of the adventure, so he left quite the impact on me. And as I got to know him better and learn about his relationship with his brother, I discovered the more human side of Lucas and just how sweet he is, which I feel makes him stronger than Valbar and Forsyth when it comes to character. Battle performance is a different story though. Starting out, Lucas is rather solid with high attack and his growth rates are okay as well. Since Lucas joins very early on, he was on my team for quite some time, and he was pretty damn potent as my ideal tank for the early game, especially since Arm's path consists of mostly physical units. Additionally, while Forsyth and Valbar are statistically better than him, he could ultimately pull his weight throughout my entire playthrough of the game, so while the weakest knight objectively, he's by no means bad, and I found him to be a great asset to the team. I imagine the majority, if asked who they thought was the best knight in Echoes, would have gone with Valbar instead, seeing as the overall best unit of the 3. Which is perfectly understandable, but I personally found Lucas to be the most interesting and well written of the knights, and a damn solid unit throughout my time in Echoes. Glad to have you on the team, buddy. The Pegasus Sisters. Okay, I'm kinda cheating on this one, but I had a really hard time deciding where to place these 3, as each of them are characters I really like and were very useful units for me, so much so that I felt all of them deserved a place on this list, but I didn't want to exclude characters like Lucas just so they could each have individual spots. So it seems they're sharing 9th place. Family do stick together after all. Hailing from the land of Arcanea, the Pegasus Sisters Katria, Pala and Est are returning characters from Shadow Dragon, only now they have a lot more personality. I found all 3 sisters to be very entertaining characters and they had a great family dynamic, Pala being the level-headed one who keeps the stone-faced Katria and the hyperactive Est in check. Each sister was unique and I love the way they interacted with each other, as they really do feel like sisters and the supports they have are really strong too. Out of the 3, I like Est the most because of how energetic she was, but the other 2 are still great and I feel they all deserve equal praise. As units, each of the Pegasus Sisters were overall pretty good during my playthrough, and because of how Echoes is built, they got a boost in utility due to their ability to become Falcon Knights. Each of them had different stats and growth rates and performed better in specific areas. Katria has strong stats in just about every area that isn't defense and her growth rates are overall solid. Pala does well in attack and HP, though the rest of her stats aren't anything amazing and her growths make her out to be the bulkiest. And finally, Est, staying true to her archetype, starts with bad stats and a low level, though she has good resistance, but has the overall highest growth rates and could potentially be the strongest if trained. All 3 of them were incredibly useful units and in my experience they each performed admirably, and at the end of the day, the 3 Pegasus Knights from Arcanea remind us why they were worthy to battle alongside the Hero King Marth, because these 3 are literally birds of a feather. Leon. Because of how Echoes handles classes and other Fire Emblem mechanics, I was always under the impression that archers were some of the most potent units in the game, and without a doubt my favourite archer is Leon. While things got off to a rocky start with this guy, He quickly came around and impressed me so much I found a new level of respect for him, which is the exact opposite of my experience with Python. The more I see and use you, the worse you become to me. One of the members of Team Valbar, as I like to put it, Leon is a very sharp-tongued individual that, while a bit obnoxious at times, is an honest and pure-hearted man, as well as arguably one of the most romanticized Fire Emblem characters. I witnessed this through how much he plays up the pretty boy stereotype, but also in his relationship with Valbar, as he clearly shows romantic interest for him due to their history together and how Valbar was able to free Leon from his depression. While homosexual characters aren't new to Fire Emblem, Leon is a bit more open about it, and while sometimes I felt it came off as a bit forced, I genuinely see it as endearing, and the support he has with Valbar is exceptionally sweet and heartwarming to me. Leon as a unit objectively isn't that great in regards to stats and growth rates. However, due to his class, he was incredibly useful throughout my time in Echoes, and out of the two archers you obtained that aren't villagers, I personally found Leon to be superior. Aside from high attack, Leon's stats are mostly average, and his growth rates aren't anything to write home about minus HP and skill. As such, Leon wasn't a one-of-a-kind mega amazing unit like some of the other Echoes characters I've used, but he was very reliable, and his role as an archer allowed him to deal hefty damage from a distance or easily pick off weakened foes. Additionally, since Celica's path has a lot of mages and dragons, I could get Leon to deal with them swiftly. Arguably, certain Fire Emblem games are tailor-made for specific classes, and it is debatable as to whether or not they will be much more useful than normal. After all, in Genealogy I've never seen mounted units as being so damn essential, and in Echoes, I feel archers fit into this category, so it's no wonder I found Leon so good on top of his already captivating character. Talk about a win-win. Sonia. Sometimes making a choice in Fire Emblem is hard. Do you play casual or classic? Which route do you take in Binding Blade? Shall I go with Erica or Ephraim? And do you side with Nor or Hoshido? However, when it came to choosing Sonia or Dean, I didn't have to think twice on this one, as Sonia immediately captivated me with her wonderful and enthralling design, and after experiencing how she is as both a character and a unit, I definitely made the right choice. Originally being an enemy, Sonia has a mysterious and dark presence to her, making her someone I'd rather not mess with. Once she joins your side though, then you can see Sonia for who she really is, and my god does she know how to embody the phrase alluring. Aside from having very sexy attire, Sonia is a cool and confident character that is drenched in womanly charm, so already she's ticking all the right boxes for me. However, there's more to her than what you see on the surface. Sonia is, in my opinion, one of the more tragic characters in Echoes, being abandoned by her father at a very young age and the life she had to live because of it, which I felt gave her more depth and made Sonia feel very sympathetic. Plus, I really like her support with Jenny, where she brings up these issues along with how she reminds Jenny of her mother. Parent issues. It's commonplace in Fire Emblem. Actually facing off against Sonia taught me that she is no slouch in regards to combat, and when I was able to recruit her by going after Dean instead, this did not change. Sonia is a strong mage that starts out with good stats aside from luck and defense, and growth rates that average around the 40% mark. While Sonia can be considered slightly redundant due to having Celica, May and Bowie present, she was still a strong addition to my team and came in with the Excalibur spell, which is damn good. And personally, I feel that Sonia could do no wrong, as in my eyes she is strong, skillful, sexy, and otherwise second to none, so she is more than deserving of the 7th place spot, once again reassuring that I definitely made the right choice. Damn, the main character of the game just misses the top 5 spot? That must really say something for the rest of the cast, and believe me, it does. Despite not reaching the very top, I do feel Arm is a strong unit and a character that while I don't think is outstanding, I'll admit he's overall very solid and still worthy of the title of Fire Emblem Lord, so while not the best, Arm has it where it counts. Much like the Radiant hero Ike, Arm doesn't start out as a Lord or Noble, but rather becomes one throughout the course of the game. Because of this, I find Arm to be much humbler and down to earth than most Lords, and isn't as over the top or stand out as them, which admittedly did make him feel not as spectacular or grand as say Sigurd or Lyn personally. However, I believe this makes Arm a much more relatable character and his journey is far more personal, so I definitely felt him grow throughout the story of Echoes. In my eyes, Arm still has traits of a Fire Emblem Lord, being very brave and honourable, yet still warm-hearted and caring, as well as being able to win people over to his side faster than Corrin, not to mention being one of the more motivational and steadfast Lords, so I couldn't help but admire his resolve. In regards to combat, Arm was one of the best units in the game, which is understandable since he's the main character. It's pretty much par for the course with most Fire Emblem games. Stat-wise, Arm is very well rounded, and his growth rates are very balanced too, only really lacking in luck and resistance. Thanks to this, when I used Arm he was very versatile and could take on pretty much anyone, made even better with the weapons Arm obtained, as the Royal Sword grants him access to Double Iron, and the Falchion is, well, the Falchion. Much like how Echoes isn't the best or worst Fire Emblem game from my perspective, I don't find Arm to be the best Fire Emblem Lord, but I would never refer to him as the worst, and is in my eyes one of the strongest characters in Echoes from both sides of the spectrum. Celica. And now we meet the true hero of Fire Emblem Echoes. Arm, you're cool and all, but Celica is where it's at, being in my opinion a much stronger and more interesting character. That while not as good as Arm gameplay wise, she was still one of my strongest units in the game and incredibly potent from beginning to end. Very similar to a certain other pair of Fire Emblem Lords. I can't be the only one that sees all the similarities between the two. Speaking of similarities, I couldn't help but notice that Celica seemed very similar to Erica. They're both princesses, they're very kind and lovely, yet not ones to shy away from a battle. They are key to the event in their respective stories, and both of them I find to be more interesting than the main lords. This is one of the main reasons I like Celica, but she has enough unique qualities to stand on her own 2 feet. For example, I think her design is amazing and the best in Echoes. She's pretty serious and bold and came off as a very assertive character to me, and I like how her ideals clash with Arm's, but it doesn't stop her from trying to fulfill them. I will admit, there are some moments in Echoes where Celica does some either really forced or really stupid shit, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world, and it'll take more than that to put her out of commission. This goes for enemy encounters too. When I used Celica, she was one of the better mages in the game and an incredibly powerful unit. Stat-wise, Celica begins with high resistance and luck, as well as solid stats in everything else except defense, plus her growth rates are rather high for this game. Personally, I didn't find Celica to be as well rounded as Arm, and didn't get as many super fancy weapons, but she was still very strong and could deal out some devastating magic attacks. She even had access to swords starting out, making her a bit more versatile and was one of the best units in a particular pathway. Celica represents why once again I choose character over combat when picking favourites. As while Arm is an overall better unit, Celica is in my eyes a more interesting and intriguing character, and a damn strong unit all things considered. So sorry boys, but in this case, I'm girl power all the way. Matilda. Pre-promotes and I generally don't get along, as I'm more in favour of training on my units from the ground up, as they usually turn out better. But sometimes there are pre-promotes that will be so good, I simply cannot say no to them, which is where Matilda comes in, as she quickly rose to the top of the ranks and was incredibly reliable at any given time. Not to mention was such a delightful and charming character who put a smile on my face whenever she was on screen, so while late to the party, Matilda was more than welcome. Along with Clive and formerly Fernand, Matilda is one of the founders of the Deliverance, and they could not have asked for a better figurehead. Matilda is one of the most impressive and stimulating characters in the game, and is so bold and lustrous that I pretty much fell for her at first glance. Matilda is a very proud knight that looks to live up to the achievements of her father. As such, I feel she has a presence along the lines of Titania and Frederick, where she is to be both honoured and respected. On top of that, I thought she was a very fun character, being rather dynamic and over the top of her speeches, and her support with Clive showed just how energetic she can be, so she had the makings of a true leader and symbol. At this rate, she'll be putting Arm out of a job. Though she joined later than most units, that didn't mean shit, as Matilda kicked all kinds of ass as soon as she joined my team and only got better the more I played Echoes. Arguably the best paladin in the game, even from an objective viewpoint, Matilda has very strong and very well balanced bases, and her growth rates are equally balanced, averaging between the 40 to 50 range. Thanks to this, Matilda was possibly the most reliable unit in the game outside of the Lords, as she could dish out damage, tank the hits, double the enemies, critical like crazy, and even stand up to magic attacks, so she otherwise never let me down, and even if you have other cavaliers that are doing well, I'd still highly recommend using Matilda. While the more I play Fire Emblem, the more I'm warming up to pre-promotes, Matilda showed me straight away that she was something else entirely, and seeing as she is both a strong character and an even stronger unit, that is something I can certainly agree with. Sabre. Though Fire Emblem is filled with characters who serve their respective lores, I've always found some of the most fascinating characters to be the ones who are out for themselves, something Sabre can undoubtedly attest to. Despite discovering him just recently, Sabre is easily one of my favourite mercenaries in the series and possibly the coolest character in Echoes, and this cast is not lacking in regards to characters, which just goes to show how great this guy is. Sabre, being a lone mercenary for hire, is a very laid back and calm individual, as well as having quite the reputation about his exploit, so he already has a lot going for him. His attitude towards life and how he interacts with everyone gives off a sense of confidence and badassery which I love, but he also has quite the impact on Celica's part of the narrative. Since he doesn't know Celica personally, he exploits her naivety at first and is considerably more blunt towards her, yet throughout the course of the game, I perceived him as a figure who's looking out for and concerned with her well-being, showing how through his time with the team, he's become like a family member to them, and his development was very subtle but incredibly effective in my eyes. Being the first physical unit in Celica's path, I was using Sabre a lot, and the more I did, the more I realised just how awesome he is. Sabre has strong bases starting out and his growth rates aren't too bad either. Due to his build, Sabre was focused on tanking physical hits for my team, which was very useful as the rest of the gang were rather frail. Sabre was seeing a lot of action in the game and he was with me until the end, and since the mercenary class is arguably one of the better classes in Echoes, sticking it out with Sabre until he became a dread fighter rewarded me greatly with an absolute monster of a unit. I find myself growing attached to units in Fire Emblem that stay with you for such a long time, especially when they turn out to be some of the most potent units in the game. Oh god, Effie, do you complete my conquest? And based on my experience with Sabre, I can officially add him to the league. You've more than earned it, good sir. Claire. Fire Emblem is no stranger to recycling characters and archetypes throughout the series, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as I find it can often lead to some very strong standalone characters, perfect examples being Sane, Jill, and Xander, with Claire now being added to the bunch. While yes, she is similar to some of the older Fire Emblem characters, Claire takes everything that makes them great, gets rid of the negatives, and adds her own unique charms and qualities, resulting in one of my favourite characters in Echoes and Pegasus Knights in the series. And I love my Pegasus Knight, which speaks fathoms about Claire's greatness. Claire's character is built around the likes of Maribel and Clarine, as she is very posh, articulate and well-bred, obviously a stark contrast to Armida's merry band of villagers. Since Clarine and Maribel aren't always the nicest of people, I assumed Claire would be annoying at first. However, she was the complete opposite by having her more obnoxious traits be underplayed in favour of showing Claire's warm side. I found Claire to be one of the most lovable characters in Echoes. She is very open-minded, cheerful, friendly, kind, and all around wonderful, and because I was exposed to so much of her good side, her occasional moments of snobbery actually helped to make Claire more three-dimensional and lead to some very humorous dialogue with other characters both in cutscenes and in her supports. Claire as a unit started out a little underwhelming, but after a few levels she really got into her stride and started kicking all kinds of commoner carcass. Stat-wise, Claire is built like a typical Pegasus Knight, though her luck is rather high, and her growths are surprisingly good too. Claire was a case of the more I put in, the more I got out, as her joining time and growth have the potential to make her an all-around great Pegasus Knight, and unless you reclass Faye, she will be the only Pegasus Knight in Arm's pathway, so she has her own niche throughout a good chunk of the game, and throughout my playthrough of Echo she was incredibly reliable and solid unit all the time, especially when I gave her that wonderful Rider's Bane. While Fire Emblem likes to use its archetypes from multiple games, Claire proves how you can make this work. Taking the best parts of the past and becoming something that feels both fresh and new, Claire was pretty much the best Echoes had to offer. Or she would be, if it wasn't for... Just before we get to number 1, I'd like to do some honourable mentions. First up is Cliff. Cliff didn't do much for me as a character and was a bit forgettable, but I will always remember how brilliant he was in battle as a mage. Next up is Gray. Gray is my favourite of the villagers and has a very lively and lovable personality, and I thought he was a good mercenary as well. After that, there's Jenny. I've always been a sucker for adorableness, and Jenny was so adorable that I was bound to like her, plus she was a great healer too. Moving on, we have Delthea. One of the latest units I got in Echoes, Delthea didn't do much for me in regards to character, though I didn't think she was bad, but holy shit was she one of the strongest units on my team and could be almost disgusting at times. And finally, there's Zeke. Again, being a rather late character, I found Zeke to be a good unit that performed well, and I also liked the direction they took his character, even if his screen time was limited. Anyway, with that out of the way, on to the number 1 entry. May. Oh yes, May, you truly are the ultimate bae. Despite having heavy competition from other characters in the game and those who have more of an impact on the story, you still managed to best all of them and be my favourite character in Fire Emblem Echoes, as you are just so awesome and enchanting I can't take my eyes off you, and you dominate the battlefield in a way most units wish they could, and though you have one hell of an ego, in your case, you unquestionably earned it. May acts as one of Celica's servants and best friends, and seeing how she is this close to someone in a position of power, She laps it all up and loves every second of it. Mei has a massive ego and is not shy about flaunting her abilities, which is something that certainly sounds obnoxious and irritating, but this wasn't the case with me, as I found Mei to have so much charm and energy that every line of dialogue that came out of her mouth was just pure gold. Mei is filled with so much enthusiasm and exuberance, to the point in which I felt she was probably the most entertaining character in the game, and I just loved how much of an attitude she had, but she never got to the point of being annoying. On top of that, Mei had great supports with Bowie and Celica, being some of the longest and what I consider in-depth supports in Echoes that were both enjoyable and meaningful as well. Mei's ego was also backed up by her performance in battle, as she was a splendid unit and definitely one of the best I used in Celica's path. Mei pretty much acts as the glass cannon of the game, having stats and growth rates focused on speed and attack, though her base resistance is good and her luck isn't bad either. Since she is a mage, Mei could easily deal with a lot of units and take them down in a single round, so throughout the entire game Mei pretty much had the highest kill count, and since Celica's path has lots of terror enemies, she made mincemeat of them. When all is said and done, the Echoes cast is fantastic, and each of the characters in the top 5 were strong candidates for the number 1 spot, but at the end of the day, from my point of view, no one in Echoes compares to the majesty of Mei, being my favourite character in the game and a unit who is always at the top of her game, which is why Mei takes the number 1 spot as my favourite character from Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. This has been Blazing Knight. I wish you all a great night, take care, and Echoes has convinced me that Fire Emblem will always deliver strong casts in every game, and after just how great Echoes, Fates and Awakenings casts were, Fire Emblem Switch has a lot to live up to. But what did you think of my choices, and who are some of your favourite characters in Fire Emblem Echoes? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, then be sure to give this video a thumbs up as it really helps out the channel, and why not subscribe in order to keep you updated with all my new content. If you're interested, why not check out my last video discussing my full thoughts on Fire Emblem Echoes, or how about my favourite characters in Fire Emblem Fates. Be sure to follow me on both Amino and Twitter at BLAZINGKNIGHT, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you all next time.